The top story on ABC News Breakfast this morning, the federal government and the opposition continue to blame each other for killing off offshore processing. Now, the government says it won't abandon its plan to eventually send asylum seekers to Malaysia, despite not being able to get its changes to the Migration Act through federal parliament.
Opposition Leader Tony Abbott says the government has lost control of border protection. But the Prime Minister says it's all the opposition's fault.
This is a failure of responsibility on behalf of Tony Abbott. Of course, I was working with Tony Abbott to deal with this legislation. I had direct discussions with him. The amendments we seek would enable the government to implement our arrangement with Malaysia. It would also enable a future government to implement arrangements like a processing centre on Nauru. So what we have here is Tony Abbott deciding to pursue his political interest to such extremes that he is determined to vote down legislation he would need if he was ever Prime Minister to implement the policy solution he says he believes in. I mean,
yes, but you have the carriage of the legislation, he doesn't. He's there to respond, you're there to succeed with your agenda as Prime Minister, and therefore it's up to you to initiate the compromise, not him.
My belief, John, is that everyone in the Parliament is here to serve the national interest. And let's be very clear here, I have never asked Tony Abbott to endorse the government's policies or plans in relation to Malaysia. What I have asked him to do is to support amendments that enable the government of the day, this government and future governments, to make appropriate choices about offshore processing. So what Tony Abbott has done is voted to end offshore processing. That is the result of his conduct. And let's be very clear about what that means, John. I believe we are at a real risk of seeing more boats, of seeing men and women and children get on boats and putting their lives at risk. Every action of the opposition here has been about politics and about themselves. There's Scott Morrison on Lateline seeing how he can politically profit from this. And John, that's what it's all been about. It hasn't been about border security. It hasn't been about appropriate treatment of refugees. All it's ever been about is the political interest of the opposition.